Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 94 and 94 information session and launch of the 9494 campaign. My name is Kayla Johnston. I am the Director of Education at the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, and I have two individuals joining me today to also talk about the campaign. So I'm going to pass the virtual mic off for our introductions.
Hello, I can go first. My name is Mehrata. I'm the project coordinator with Reconciliation Thunder and very excited to be here with you guys today.
Hello, my name is Kate McKenzie. I'm a volunteer with Circles for Reconciliation, and this is my third year with the 9494 campaign.
Before we start off, I wanted to share an opening quote from the Honorable Murray Sinclair. He said, "I stand before you hopeful that we are at the threshold of a new era, a point of fundamental change in Canada's story, a period of change that, if sustained by the will of the people, will forever realign the shared history of Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada." Now, before we begin with an overview of the program, I wanted to share a quick land acknowledgement from myself representing the full team here. I'm coming to you virtually from Winnipeg, Manitoba, the territory of many Indigenous nations, where we live, work, and play on the lands of the Innu, Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, and on the unceded territories of the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Denisovan nations. I live in the heart of the Red River Métis Nation and on Treaty 1 territory, where the water I drink comes from Treaty 3 territory, and the power for our homes comes from Treaty 5 territory. I acknowledge the strength, courage, perseverance of residential school survivors who've shared their truths so that we may learn from them. One of the more famous quotes that the Honorable Murray Sinclair has shared over the course of the TRC was that education got us into the mess and education is going to get us out. For myself, I have a responsibility to help advance reconciliation by educating others about the history and legacy of residential schools, as well as other colonial systems guided by trauma-informed and survivor-centered care. Please take a moment to think about the land you currently reside upon, where you may also be, and acknowledge those who went before, as well as those who have yet to come. Now, with that, I'm going to pass the virtual mic over once again to one of our team members to talk a little bit about the 94 and 94 campaign overview before we take a look at the campaign objectives.
I can go ahead and take this one. So the 94 in 94 campaign is essentially an effort to bring awareness to the 94 calls to action. And the reason why we are doing that is because, and my colleague Kate will talk maybe a bit more about that as well, but a lot of Canadians today are not aware of the 94 calls to action. And that is so many years after it's been, instituted and called upon. And this is the second year that especially Reconciliation Thunder is doing this and bringing attention to the whole purpose of it is to make sure that individually, as a corporation, organization, an agency, bodies, to all of us actually pick up this call to action, see what we can do and how we can participate in this reconciliation, because it's not just words, it's not just a text on a paper, but it's something that we do have to live out. And so that is the whole idea of the 94 in 94 campaign, to really walk out these callings.
Now, up on screen, you're going to see a page from the Reconciliation Thunder website, reconciliationthunder.org/9494, where you can get a little bit information about the campaign as well as the campaign goals. So up on screen, you'll see that we are asking people to follow Reconciliation Thunder and the Circles for Reconciliation from this past Monday, September 30th, all the way to January 1st, 2025, where there's going to be a campaign posting. Every day, they'll be sharing one of the 94 calls to action to highlight. Now, I'll pass to Kate to talk a little bit about the campaign goals.
Yeah, so as you can see, there are two main campaign goals here for 9494. The first is to address the fact that there are still many Canadians who have not read the TRC's 94 calls to action, which were released in 2015 following the final report. And this really came to light back in 2021 when the tragic events in Kamloops were brought to light. We realized so many people in Canada are not aware of the 94 calls to action or what they mean or who they address, whose responsibility they are to implement. So that was kind of a starting point, a launching point for this campaign. And the second goal is to challenge individuals and organizations to choose at least one call to action to act on using a reconciliation action plan. So challenging you all to join the campaign and identify at least one of the 94 calls to action that speak to you. That's a broad overview of the campaign goals here.
Now, before we go a little bit deeper, we wanted to share a little bit about the three organizations that are involved in this year's campaign, from the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, Reconciliation Thunder, and Circles for Reconciliation. So I'm just going to switch the share screen here and pull up my slide deck. In the meantime, you get to see a very beautiful background of my manatees, very calming. Now, when it comes to who we are at the NCTR, I'm just going to give a very shortened version of this. And I think it's very much reflected in the quote that you now see up on screen. And it reads, whoop, "If the stories of our people are not accessible to the general public, it will be as if those experiences never occurred. And if their voices are rendered as museum pieces, it will be as if that experience is frozen in time. What we need are open, dynamic, and interactive spaces and participatory forms of narrative, knowledge, and research." And this is a very fitting way to step into the 21st century and into a new kind of relationship. Because at our core at the NCTR, we are an archive meant to protect the materials in our collection. We are the permanent safe home for all of the statements, documents, and other materials gathered by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada during its mandate. We are here to serve survivors and families by providing access to this content, to their records. We are here for educators to share more about the history and legacy of the residential school system in classrooms. We are here for researchers to dive deeper into the mysteries that exist. And I'll tell you, there's still many, many questions when it comes to that history, legacy, and impacts of the residential school system. But overall, we are here to ensure we can help foster healing and reconciliation by providing access to our content and ensure that it's never forgotten or repeated. I'm going to switch back to the website and scroll down to the very bottom, because at the bottom of the web page, you can get a little bit more information about our three organizations. Just below is the different contact means for the NCTR, Circles, as well as Reconciliation Thunder. And scrolling down just a little bit further, we have some drop-down menus here. Now, Messerette, Kate, do either of you want to take the go-ahead to talk about your organization?
Sure, I can jump in and talk about Circles for Reconciliation. So Circles for Reconciliation is a grassroots nonprofit partnership between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people with the aim of establishing trusting, meaningful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples as part of the 94 call to action from the TRC. So to establish these meaningful, trusting relationships, it is essentially sharing circles. So small gatherings of equal number of Indigenous and non-Indigenous participants. So 5 Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, or Inuit participants, and 5 non-Indigenous participants, meeting once a week for 10 weeks and discussing themes related to reconciliation, such as residential schools, day schools, intergenerational trauma, and discussing these very important topics. And really what the heart of Circles for Reconciliation is creating those relationships, building those relationships that go beyond the 10 weeks and foster a mutual respect. So that's a high level of Circles for Reconciliation.
Wonderful. And I see the website is circlesforreconciliation.ca. For those interested, this is kind of the landing page where you can learn more about the organization, the circles that are upcoming, some of the themes that exist within those circles that can be touched upon. I know originally the focus was the calls to action, but I visited frequently and I see that the number of topics is ever increasing, including the Indian Act, as well as some other components as well that are really interesting. Anything else that you wanted to highlight about the webpage or any focus for Circles?
Oh gosh, how much time do we have for Circles? Circles is expanding. There have been Circles in cities across Canada, in Toronto, and across to BC, to Alberta. The home office is here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We've been operating since 2016. Hundreds of people have participated. We now do Circles via Zoom, which is a wonderful way to connect people from across Canada together. So you're actually meeting people not just within your own city, your own community, you're meeting people across Canada and establishing those relationships, those mutually respectful relationships with folks you wouldn't have otherwise met. So there are in-person circles and there are virtual circles, a little bit of everything to accommodate accessible relationships with each other.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing about Circles. And I'm going to go back to the main webpage here for Reconciliation Thunder. And I'm just going to scroll up a bit just to be our little bit of a starter. If Meseret, you would like to share a little bit about Reconciliation Thunder.
Yeah, absolutely. So a very high level overview. Reconciliation for Thunder is a nonprofit that uses social media to promote awareness and promote action on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to actions, the 94 calls to action. And so what we essentially do is really highlighting these 94 calls to action. And one of the ways that we do that is by partnering with Circles for Reconciliation and the NCTR to, just promote these calls to action. And this is our website that you're looking at and the landing page.
Wonderful. Thank you, Meseret, for sharing about the Reconciliation Thunder webpage as well as about the organization. Next, I wanted to share a little bit of information regarding where the 94 calls to action came from before talking about the 94 calls to action, the status of the calls, and then the barriers to reconciliation before we move into a little bit of information connected to how to get involved with this year's campaign, the different means of doing so. So I'm just going to pull up my presentation slides once more and move into the calls to action and where they come from. Now, the 94 calls to action come from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, which comes from IRSA, which is the Indian Residential Schools Settlement Agreement. Now, just due to time, I'm not going to go into a deep dive to the different components, but here's just a very brief visual representation. There was financial compensation provided to residential school survivors through what's known as the Common Experience Payment, or CEP. There was also compensation provided through the Independent Assessment Process, or IAP. There were funds provided to Indigenous and grassroots organizations through the Aboriginal Healing Foundation. There was $125 million distributed. Once those funds were all handed out, the Aboriginal Healing Foundation closed its doors. But there was also the creation of the Resolution Health Support Program and health supports for survivors and families, commemoration initiatives, and then the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And you can see branching off the TRC is the NCTR. So when it comes to the TRC, very broadly, they were established in 2008 as a holistic means and a comprehensive response of responding to the residential school system. It was the first court-ordered truth commission of its kind established in Canada, and the courts have continued to play a part in the process even after the TRC closed its doors. There were 3 commissioners appointed in 2008. However, they resigned shortly thereafter, and 3 new commissioners, the ones you see pictured on screen, were appointed in 2009 by the different party members of the settlement agreement. And those are the Honorable Marie Sinclair, Dr. Marie Wilson, and Chief Wilton Littlechild. And when it comes to the activities of the TRC, they were allocated $60 million over a 5-year mandate, and they had a 1-year extension to document the history of survivors, families, communities, anyone impacted by the residential school system. It's important to recognize that the TRC collected experiences not only from former students, but from anyone who had something to say about the residential school system and their impact upon themselves or their families. So the Commission had the responsibility to tell Canadians what happened in residential schools, honor the lives of former students and their families, as well as create a permanent record of the history of the residential school system and its legacy. Within that are the 6 volumes, it's actually 10 books in length, of the TRC's final report, as well as the 94 calls to action that were launched in June of 2015. Now, when it comes to the calls to action, they are a guiding document. And what the TRC said was that too many Canadians know little or nothing about the deep historical roots of these conflicts. The lack of this knowledge has had serious consequences for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and communities, and for Canada as a whole. And when it comes to the calls to action, the Commission actually set out 10 principles of reconciliation. The first one stating that the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is to serve a framework for reconciliation for our country, as well as these 94 calls to action. And these were gathered or pulled together in order to redress the legacy of residential schools and help advance the process of reconciliation in Canada. Here you can see that there are 22 thematic topic areas, with justice accounting for the most number of calls to action with 18. But you'll see there's a wide range of themes here, everything from child welfare, education and health. We have the National Council for Reconciliation. We have ones connected to church apologies and youth programs, to missing children and unmarked burials, but also media, sports, business, just to name a few. Now, when it comes to what's the status of completion of the calls to action, there are a number of websites that you can actually visit, and I utilize all of them. There is the Yellowhead Institute, which issued reports on the status of the calls to action up until 2023, last year. There is the website CBC Beyond 94. They update about on a yearly basis. And then there's Indigenous Watchdog. Now, Indigenous Watchdog updates the most frequently with about monthly updates that takes a look at the calls to action, not only from the different government bodies, from federal, provincial, territorial, municipal, but also Indigenous government bodies, NGOs, and other organizations and associations that have been working towards the calls. Now, what you're going to quickly notice here is that A, the numbers don't match, and B, it states there are different calls to action that have been completed to date. And there are a number of reasons why this is the way it is. And I'm going to address that in this next component, which is related to the barriers to reconciliation and some of the observations that the Yellowhead Institute has made. Now, when it comes to the barriers to reconciliation, the writers of the Yellowhead Institute's report have identified 5 major barriers. So the first barrier is connected to paternalism, a deep rooted ongoing attitude and behavior of politicians, bureaucrats, policymakers that result in this we know best mentality that prevents Indigenous peoples from taking the lead on issues and bringing solutions to the table. The second is anti-Indigenous discrimination. Canada asserts legal myths like the doctrine of discovery to justify the disposition of Indigenous peoples from their lands and subsequently manufacture poverty. The third is the public interest, but I like to call it the lack of public interest, and that is policymakers having used the disinterest or lack of interest of non-Indigenous peoples to show up their inaction. If it doesn't affect me, then I don't need to worry about it. The fourth is insufficient resources. We get no shortage of promises, but with ongoing and rampant funding inequalities, meaningful reconciliation is just out of reach. And a good example of this is the severe reduction in funding connected to missing children and unmarked burials now having a cap. Now, the fifth is that reconciliation has been used to exploit or used as a performance. In this case, we have government bodies, institutions, organizations saying one thing, but doing something else. So they're not walking the talk, as we say. And so these were the biggest barriers that the Yellowhead Institute had identified for us to actually achieve or work towards meaningful reconciliation. Now, they had a couple other observations that I'm going to share. One is that not every call to action is deep. There are some calls to action that are kind of like the low-hanging fruit, the easy calls to action. And if you take a look at the calls to action that have been completed to date, these are the ones that are those easy ones. The ones that have yet to be addressed, those are calls to action that require greater structural change in order to address those inequalities. Now, with that, the other observation is the calls to action. Much like the calls for justice from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry, as well as the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, their recommendations, all of these guiding documents are being used like tally lists, where the more we can check off, there are individuals who will say, yes, we did it. We've achieved reconciliation. Now, I have some good news and I have some bad news. The bad news piece is that reconciliation cannot be addressed by a single event, accomplishment, or a pot of money. It is an ongoing process. And if you take a look at the TRC's definition of reconciliation, and I will share there are a great number of definitions, and your definition might differ from mine, but the TRC said reconciliation is the process of establishing and maintaining a respectful relationship. There's a commitment component to this. Now, the upswing, I said, there's some good news in here, and that is the burden to do all 94 calls to action doesn't fall upon a single person's shoulders. And I'm going to revisit this when we talk about, or I should say, when I talk about the reconciliation action plans. Now, I'm going to leave off on this one last little piece when it comes to the Yellowhead Institute's status report, and that is, they have stated it is difficult, if not impossible, to take claims regarding this progress on the calls to action seriously. And the reason for this is that we're not collecting the data that we need to determine whether or not the programs that we're funding are actually making a difference. And so you see, I have 4 calls to action listed up on screen. Number 2, number 9, 19, and 30. And those are measuring the child welfare gaps. That is, how many Indigenous children are currently in the child welfare system, as well as distinction-based numbers, how many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, non-status individuals are in the child welfare system. Number 9 is about measuring and closing the education gaps. 19 is measuring and closing the health-related gaps. And number 30 is about eliminating overrepresentation in the justice system. And so with that, what we really need to be doing when it comes to marking progress as the calls to action is encouraging these organizations, institutions, government bodies to collect the information needed in order for us to show that change that is happening based upon the programs that are being funded or supported. Now, the last little piece I'll share related to this is from the Yellowhead Institute's 2023 report. And in that report, they've actually stated they are not going to be continuing the documentation or reporting on the status of the calls to action for the fact that there were 3 calls to action completed in 2021 after the Kamloops announcement of unmarked burials. However, since that time, there has been no major progress from government bodies to address any of the calls to action. Where there has been progress is through non-governmental organizations, grassroots organizations. And so the challenge is the lack of data and information in order for us to mark progress, but also with those barriers to reconciliation, we are not seeing the fulfillment of many of the calls to action to date. And if you visit the Indigenous Watchdog website, you're going to get a breakdown as to the number of calls started, number of calls in progress, number stalled, and the ones that have been completed to date. And so with that, that's quite a bit of information when it comes to the calls to action. So I'm going to switch back to the website. As this next little section is really about how to get involved with the 9494 campaign. Oh, I see there was a comment in the chat here, which is if we're able to make a complete transcription available of the video. I will have to look into that, but I believe we would be able to institute closed captioning at the end once the video is processed. So I'll take a look and see if we're able to get that information uploaded or connected to this video. Now, as for the campaign itself, Messeret, Kate, do either of you want to take the first piece on talking about how they can participate?
Yeah, I can start off, and Kate, you can add on to it. So the best way you can get involved right now is by joining us. Follow us on social medias. Follow Reconciliation Thunder, as well as Circles for Reconciliation, and share the posts that we have up. We will be posting the 94 calls every single day for the next 94 days, as we have mentioned. And we encourage you to follow us along and share that as well, spread that awareness. And if you haven't yet joined the campaign mailing list, we encourage you to go to the bottom of the Reconciliation Thunder webpage, which is what you're seeing on the screen right now. Put in your name, your email, submit that, and every single day you'll get a brief outline of the call to action that day. And you'll get to read a little bit about it, some of the actions that action plans that you can take. And that is another great way to get involved by keeping with us, keeping track of the calls to action every single day and committing to that, and educating yourself and sharing those as well. We will also lastly have graphics in the mailing list, and we encourage you to download those and share it yourself. Share it among your circles. Share it with the people around you. Have conversations around this at the dinner tables or with friends, whether it's in school. And yeah, that is one of the best ways that you can get involved at the moment along with this campaign. So remember, go to social media, follow us, Reconciliation Thunder, as well as Circles for Reconciliation, and be sure to, just engage with the posts, share them, actually educate yourself on each call to action every single day, and join the mailing list if you haven't yet.
I'm on mute here, and I'm going to put my 2 co-hosts on the spot here. So I just talked a little bit about the good news of reconciliation and the means, and it is connected to the reconciliation plan. So I'm going to pose you a question, and then we're going to come back around to it, and that is, out of the 94 calls to action, which is your call to action? Which is the one that you gravitate towards or feel that passion or desire to kind of advance forward? And so I'll give you that time to think about it as I pull up the slides related to the reconciliation action plans. And so when it comes to things that you can get involved in or how can you get involved, one of the activities you can do is create yourself a reconciliation action plan. Very broadly, this comes from 2015 by one of our former directors of education who developed these 6 calls that you see here, or I should say the 6 actions. And you're going to notice 4 out of the 6 are education based and 2 are action oriented. So they are: learn the history between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, understand the history and legacy of residential schools and other colonial systems, explore the unique intersections we have between treaty, constitutional, Indigenous, and human rights in Canada. You can recognize the rich contributions Indigenous peoples have made. And so those are the 4 education, and the 2 action are take action to address historical injustices and present-day wrongs, and then teach others. So with the 6 actions, there are 6 steps. So the step 1 for creating your reconciliation action plan is to review the calls to action. Follow along with 94 and 94 and see where there's that thematic topic area that speaks to you. Consider, what are your passions? You don't have to do all 94. But find one that you can champion. And you can create a reconciliation action plan on an interest that isn't directly mentioned in the calls to action. So review the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples or the calls for justice or other guiding documents, and use that as a means of thinking about how you can address those 6 actions through the creation of a plan. The second is to review the 6 actions, from learn, understand, and explore to recognize, take action, and teach others. Consider what activities you can do under each action item. Consider what's happening across Canada, in your region, locally. Think about your strengths and interests, as well as resources you have found while researching and what you can share with others. The third step is to review a sample action plan for ideas on what you can do to educate yourself. And at the end of these slides, I'm going to go back to the webpage and I'll show you where you can download all this information as well as the sample action plans. Now, there are many different things that you can do, whether you're just starting out or you're further along. One of the challenges that I see when it comes to reconciliation is the fear that institutions and individuals have that they might do something wrong, that they might offend someone, or they might cause harm in this work. And the key piece to that is really taking that humble approach. Acknowledge where you are, what you still need to learn, and how you can learn from others. Step 4 is to set a goal. Whether you would like to complete some of your chosen actions or set a goal to help keep yourself accountable. The idea being, what might you be able to do when we come to January 1st at the end of the 94-94 campaign? What might you be able to do by June 21st, the National Indigenous Peoples Day, or even next year's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation? The 5th step, you'll notice, is fairly short, and that is download the reconciliation action plan template and fill it in. And the last one, this is that accountability piece. And that's share your plan. Share it with friends, with family, with coworkers, with your neighbors, your cubicle neighbors, and over social media. There are a number of hashtags that you can use, from 94 and 94, reconciliation action, my reconciliation action plan, and you're going to want to tag the NCTR, Reconciliation Thunder, and or Circles for Reconciliation with these plans. So I'm going to go back to the webpage. I'm going to pull it back here. But previously, you'll notice I had pulled up all the different graphics that are going to be shared during the campaign. So you can browse and find that specific graphic that speaks to your, that specific call to action. But talking about the action plans, that can be found on the NCTR website. So I've just pulled up our website, nctr.ca. And again, if you just scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I'll take it nice and slow. You're going to find a menu at the very bottom here. Almost there. Under education programming, right at the top, reconciliation plans. So when you click on that, you're going to find all the information for this year's campaign. You're going to find information about the 6 actions for reconciliation and then the 6 steps. In addition to the 6 steps, you're going to find a list of the calls to action where you can download that piece, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the MMIWG calls for justice, as well as the template I mentioned. So I'm going to scroll down here because in addition to the template, and these are all PDF-based documents. So here's one version of it. Going back to that main page here, if you are finding it difficult to think up ideas on how you can address each one of those calls to action, you can download a pre-made action plan based upon those thematic topic areas. So for instance, I'm just going to pick the first one here, calls to action 1 to 5 for child welfare. And you're also going to see it's a PDF document that has the list of all the resources that's mentioned. So for this one, it's about learning and understanding, exploring Indigenous ways of knowing on child welfare and rearing by reading books like Growing a Child, and the impact of the residential school system on child welfare by learning about the TRC's final report and the information contained about the residential school system. Under Explore, it's reading the TRC's calls to action, the UN Declaration, and there are some of the UN Declaration specifically that talk about the rights of the child. And so that's numbers 7, 14, 17, 21, and 22. But you also want to take a look at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. You're going to want to do some recognition. So learn what Indigenous peoples have done in your region related to child welfare. Here in Manitoba, the late Dr. Stella Blackbird helped found and develop the Macoun-Saik Intergenerational Child Center that was very much grounded in Innu as well as Anishinaabe child rearing practices. The idea being raising these children who can be proud and fully immersed within their culture. And the take action piece, well, that can be through supporting Indigenous child welfare programs and organizations like the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, or things like participating in the Spirit Bear Plan to help end inequalities in public services for First Nations children, youth, and families. Now, the teach piece, well, that's to attend or organize an event for September 30th, and you can see in brackets there, or even beyond. There is a whole list of calendar days for days of action, remembrance, or engagement that you can show your support in. And that big piece is share these resources, share what you've learned with others. Now, going back to that webpage here, you can find those specific plans all across the board to represent all the different thematic areas or topics of the calls to action. Now, taking a look here, some of the last little pieces that we have are connected to the website. And I'm just going to pull up the 94 and 94 website once more. So Meseret already talked a little bit about sharing the posts that are going to be shared on Reconciliation Thunder and Circles for Reconciliation through Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. But as I shared earlier, you can download specific graphics if you wish and share upon your own. In addition to that, you can also get involved with the mailing list as we talked about, but there's also campaign t-shirts available. So up at the top, you'll see that there is a merchandise link here, and the funds when it comes to the sale of the merchandise goes back into the campaign program. Meseret, did you have any additional information connected to that by chance?
No, that's pretty good. We did have sort of during the Orange Shirt Day March, we did have a giveaway for t-shirts and stuff like that. But everything that you've mentioned should be up to date as far as I recall.
Wonderful. And then the last piece that I have here, and you're going to notice there's a great big red donate button in the top right-hand corner. So if you would like to support this year's campaign, go to that top right-hand corner and click donate. All donations collected through the website is going to be used to cover the costs of the campaign and help us reach more people. The idea being we want to reach as many people as possible when it comes to this campaign and ensure that they are educated and aware about the calls to action and then developing those action plans. Now, Kate Messeret, have I missed anything? Is there anything else that you would like to add when it comes to the program or?
I think you've done an excellent job covering most of it. Sorry, Kate, go ahead.
Oh no, so sorry. Same here. You have covered a lot here. I can't think of a single thing.
Perfect. Now I do see a question in the chat, and I'm going to pull it up on screen here. And maybe after this, I'll come back to both of you to see what's that call to action that stands out to you. So Jeff had asked, have we considered that with each call to action, he had seen the first few through Instagram here, that we add some sort of form of status percentage on what has been completed for each to date. So that's something that we can definitely pass along to the Reconciliation Thunder team when it comes to the website and the status of the calls to action for each one of those thematic topic areas. But I'll tell you, it's also already available on the Indigenous Watchdog website. They have very nice graphic available that breaks it down per thematic topic area, kind of with a stoplight of red, green, and yellow, but also that greater kind of pie piece that talks a little bit about the calls to action completed, started, stalled, and kind of the status when it comes to that. But we love that suggestion that we are able to potentially add a little bit more information when it comes to those areas. Now, taking a look at the time, it looks like we've come to the end of our session here. Kate Messeret, did you have any final comments about either of your organizations? Anything else that you would like to direct or highlight before we wrap up tonight?
The only thing I would say, because you did a wonderful job there, is Reconciliation Thunder is all about bringing awareness to the calls to action and promoting truth and reconciliation's objectives here. And so we really would love for you to get engaged and involved. And so we highly encourage you, should you have any questions or, you know, anything that you think of, like the suggestion that this person made, that was great. We really encourage you to reach out to us. If you have any questions for us, let us know. We'd love to answer it. And shoot us an email. You should find our contact information on the website at the bottom. But yeah, we just encourage you to really get involved. Be curious, ask questions, learn, check out the websites that we've pointed out in this session, and do more, go beyond that as well. And so really, yeah, we just encourage you specifically for Reconciliation Thunder to reach out to us with any questions that you might have. And if you want to learn more, please don't hesitate.
Yes, I will echo that on the Circles for Reconciliation side. Please visit our website, familiarize yourself with some of our materials. If you are interested in Circles for Reconciliation, there is a registration form as well on the website. And like I said, circles all across the country, all across the city of Winnipeg itself, across the province of Manitoba. Check out some of our themes. All of our resources are available on the website if you are interested in, you know, reading a little bit about what you can expect in a circle, the themes on topics like day schools or residential school. You can read those themes before attending. It's not anything that you are going to be surprised when you come in. We have all kinds of interesting initiatives like celebration of Indigenous languages. So that's another really interesting resource on our website here. As far as the campaign, I think you all covered it. We're going to be sharing those posts on the Circles for Reconciliation social media. So we have our Instagram, we have our Facebook. You'll see it on our stories, on our feed. Feel free to share those posts on your story or save it and post it permanently on your feed. And we hope to see you at some point in a circle.
And if I may, like, just Circles for Reconciliation, I did that. I was a part of it. I think when it started out, it was a fantastic initiative, and I truly benefited from it. Still good friends with the person that I was matched with, and I think the whole concept of like reconciling through relationships, at least to me, it speaks volumes and is groundbreaking. It's one thing to learn about these things and to like talk about them in theory, but and they have done studies on this in the US on something different, on different socioeconomic populations, but um, they did find that when you have relationships with certain communities and certain groups, it makes all the difference. And so I can't think of a better way to live out reconciliation than to actually, um, you know, have relationships with our Indigenous friends. And so I really highly encourage you, if you haven't yet looked into Circles for Reconciliation, see if you can participate and sign up for it. Truly, it is life changing. So I encourage you to do that.
Thank you for that. And I agree. For me, reconciliation, at the heart of reconciliation is establishing those mutually respectful relationships. And relationships are at the heart of it for me. So I appreciate the hard work that the folks at Circles for Reconciliation are doing to foster these relationships.
Wonderful. Well, maybe as this wrapping piece, I had posed to you that question of, do you have a thematic topic area or a specific call to action that you would like to bring attention to? And maybe I'll just pull up the website here with a list of all the graphics. For myself, that's why I picked that reconciliation plan for child welfare. My call to action is number 6. We call upon the federal government to develop and I see it's missing from the website here. Or is it under education? Here we go. To repeal Section 43 of the Criminal Code. So what that is our spanking law or corporal punishment call to action. And so the TRC had said that there are many countries today that have repealed similar codes. And with a lot of research done to date, there is no reason why we should have corporal punishment within our books, given the alternatives that exist and that history and legacy of excessive punishment within the residential school system. So I know there's been quite a lot of movement over the past 2 years around this call to action. So this is the one that I champion. Nesseret, Kate, do you have a specific thematic topic area or a call that you champion?
Well, I'm drawn to the justice section. It is so impactful for Indigenous and folks across Canada. I'm always drawn to, I think it's 41. We call upon the federal government to appoint a public inquiry into the causes of and remedies for the disproportionate victimization of Aboriginal, Indigenous women and girls. And it's just such a ongoing, although we have this final report of calls for justice, we have so far to go. We have so much work to do, and I think that especially today on October 4th, it's important to think about what we are still working towards in terms of addressing those disproportionate numbers of victimization of Indigenous women and girls, and 2S plus. I have a MyWG 2S plus.
And Nesseret, did you have one area or a specific call?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also drawn to the justice area. I'm a law student, soon to be a lawyer, and so definitely drawn to that area. And specifically, I have 27 and 28, but both of them sort of focus on training law students and lawyers to be culturally competent to provide, um, you know, uh, basically competent legal services to Indigenous peoples. And I do think it's such an important call because one of the professional code of conducts for us is to provide competent legal services. But when we think of competency, often we think of like legal skills and like the substantive law. But I think cultural competency is so important to provide a fulsome and client informed services. And so I think it's a wonderful call, and that's the one that I'm drawn to. And I'm proud that my school now offers a mandatory Indigenous course in our school. And I look forward to all schools in Canada doing the same, all law schools in Canada doing the same. And also the Law Society hopefully will continue to actually provide and continue to provide cultural trainings for lawyers as well. And I pray it continues throughout my practice, because I really think it should be ongoing and it is important. So, yeah. You're muted.
It helps if I unmute. Kate Messeret, thank you so much for joining me tonight to help kind of launch or bring attention to the 94 in 94 campaign. So we have a number of days left until January 1st, 2025. So as shared already, please share the information as widely as you can. Donate, participate, create a reconciliation action plan. And we hope to see you a little bit later in the year when we talk and wrap with this final campaign. So with that, I'm going to be closing up the stream, but thank you all for joining. This is going to go directly onto the YouTube page where you're going to be able to find it later. But with that, have a good night. Thank you. Hi.
Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.